The bills scattered across my kitchen table seemed to mock me in the dim light of my apartment. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in November 2019, and I was staring at numbers that didn't make sense anymore. $203,457 in total debt, credit cards, personal loans, a second mortgage I never should have taken, and my daughter's college loans that I'd co-signed. At 48 years old, this wasn't how I'd imagined my life would turn out. My daughter Sarah had dropped out of college after 2 years, the guilt eating her alive as she watched me drain my savings to keep up with the payments. My wife Linda had left 3 years ago, tired of what she called my endless optimism without action. The medical supply business I'd tried to start had failed spectacularly, leaving me with a warehouse full of inventory nobody wanted and credit card bills that made my hands shake every time I opened them. That night, as the heating system in my cheap apartment rattled and groaned, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years. I began to write. Not a business plan or another desperate scheme, but the raw truth about how I'd gotten here. The words poured out of me like a confession. I'm Mark Anderson, and I've spent my entire life running from failure by chasing what I thought success should look like. I bought the big house because that's what successful people do. I started a business because entrepreneurs are winners. I paid for an expensive college because that's what good parents do. But sitting here at 2 a.m., surrounded by the wreckage of all these should decisions, I realize I've never once asked myself what I actually want. As I wrote those words, something shifted inside me. It wasn't hope. I was too tired for hope. It was something else. Clarity. I'd spent decades trying to build a life that looked good from the outside, and all it had gotten me was crushing debt and empty relationships. That's when I heard the notification on my phone. It was an email from my brother Steve, who I hadn't spoken to in months. "Saw this and thought of you," was all it said, with a link to a podcast episode about a man who'd rebuilt his life by helping other people avoid the financial mistakes he'd made. I almost deleted it. The last thing I needed was another success story making me feel worse about my failures, but something made me click. Maybe it was the late hour, or maybe it was the strange clarity that had come from writing down my truth. Either way, that click would change everything, though I didn't know it then. The podcast episode featured a former banker who had lost everything in 2008. Instead of trying to climb back up the corporate ladder, he'd started teaching basic financial literacy in community centers. By helping others avoid predatory loans and credit card debt, he'd discovered his true purpose and eventually built a successful financial education company. I listened to that episode 5 times that night, but not because of his success. It was something he said about failure. Your mistakes are not your identity, they're your inventory. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of possibility. Not the desperate optimism that had driven me to make bad decision after bad decision, but something more grounded. I had an inventory all right, decades of financial mistakes, poor decisions, and hard lessons. The next morning, instead of avoiding my usual call from Bill, my most persistent debt collector, I answered. "Bill," I said, "I'd like to propose something different." I explained that I wanted to work out a plan, but I also wanted to understand exactly how the collection process worked. To my surprise, Bill talked to me for an hour, explaining the intricacies of debt collection, credit scoring, and negotiation. I spent the next week diving deep into personal finance, not as a way to get rich quick, but to truly understand the system that had ensnared me. I studied bankruptcy law, credit repair, debt consolidation, not from get-out-of-debt-fast websites, but from academic sources and financial institutions. I began to see patterns in my own financial mistakes that I recognized in others' stories. On a whim, I posted in a local Facebook group, "If you're drowning in debt, I've been there. I'm not a financial advisor, but I'll share my mistakes so you don't make them too. Coffee's on me." I expected ridicule. Instead, 12 people messaged me privately. That Saturday, 8 of them met me at a local coffee shop. I was completely honest about my situation and what I was learning. No success story, no secret system, just raw truth about financial mistakes and what I was discovering about how to fix them. A woman named Maria was there with her husband. They were about to sign for a payday loan to cover their son's emergency dental work. Because of what I'd learned that week, I was able to help them find a dental school program that would do the work at a fraction of the cost and connect them with a local credit union that offered much better loan terms. Word spread. The next weekend, 20 people showed up, then 30. Someone suggested I start recording these coffee shop sessions as a podcast. The 2 a.m. Money Talk with Mark started as just me sharing what I was learning about digging out of debt. But something unexpected happened. It wasn't just about money. It was about the shame, the secrets, and the emotional weight of financial struggle. The podcast caught the attention of a local radio station. They offered me a weekly segment about personal finance from the perspective of someone still in the trenches. I was honest about my ongoing struggles with debt, but also shared every step forward, every negotiation tactic I learned, every small victory. My brother Steve, the one who'd sent that fateful email, helped me set up a website where I shared free resources and templates for negotiating with creditors. We included calculators for debt payoff strategies and a forum where people could share their experiences. No products, no courses, no get-rich-quick schemes, just practical information and honest conversation. The turning point came when a producer from a major financial news network stumbled across my podcast. She was intrigued by my approach, a financial mess-up teaching others while cleaning up his own disaster. They invited me to appear as a guest expert, not despite my struggles, but because of them. That appearance led to a book deal. The advance helped me accelerate my debt payoff plan, but more importantly, it gave me a platform to reach more people who were struggling. I called it Financial Freedom After 40, a guide for people who've made every mistake in the book. Today, 3 years after that 2 a.m. moment of clarity, my life looks very different. I've paid off over 80% of my debt through a combination of strategic negotiation, increased income from my media appearances and books, and the simple principles I teach others. The financial education company I founded helps people navigate debt through practical education and support groups, all based on the principle that your financial mistakes are your inventory, not your identity. My daughter Sarah is back in college, this time studying financial psychology. She runs support groups for young adults dealing with financial anxiety. My ex-wife Linda and I have reconciled our friendship, bonding over the irony that my endless optimism finally paid off once I grounded it in reality and service to others. But the greatest transformation wasn't in my bank account. It was in my understanding of success. Real success isn't about looking good on paper. It's about turning your darkness into light for others. Every time I meet someone drowning in debt and shame, I think back to that man sitting at his kitchen table at 2 a.m., ready to give up. And I tell them what I wish someone had told me. Your story isn't over. In fact, it might just be beginning.